One thing that I've been keeping a close eye on, even with the market having pullbacks and sell offs, is the demand around ETFs, specifically the Ethereum side. Why? Well, because the Ethereum ETFs are signaling how impactful the overall market can be once we start to see some of these projects heat up. I feel like Ethereum ETFs have been very successful due to the fact that Ethereum has been breaking out. We've been seeing a lot of great news around Ethereum, especially with Tom Lee accumulating a ton of Ethereum, which is leading to a big spotlight being put on Ethereum. Now, if we're thinking about this and we're thinking about the market right now and where we are at, everything has kind of, taken a back seat with the market sell off. A lot of people think that the market is done, that it's topped out, and it's the end of the world for crypto. But again, when I look at what's happening right now in this space, I just can't help but to feel like we're at that last wave, if you will. And what I mean by that is the last wave before we see the tsunami form. Because again, the last wave back in 2020 into 2021 was roughly November into December of 2020. And what happened during that time was the wave hit and it wiped out altcoins in a big way, to the point where almost everyone was only focused on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Right now, the same can be said. Most people are looking at Ethereum. Most people are not looking into altcoins right now. And I feel like this is a very big mistake because all we are getting told is Ethereum, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin. The ETFs, everything happening around the market has been spotlighting Ethereum and Bitcoin. But this is at a time where I've been saying we are just in the beginning phase for phase two. We still have phase three and phase four to go through. And do I think that this cycle is identical to previous cycles? No. A lot has changed, and we have to acknowledge that. But I still believe that we are following the liquidity cycle at this point. So we still have a few very good months ahead of us for crypto and for the price action for altcoins. And that's what I'm focused on right now. Now, when we think about Ethereum, when we look at the market for it, the ETF demand has been extremely exciting to watch. A lot of the price action right now that we are seeing across the board isn't the best because of the recent market sell off, but Ethereum is so close to its all time highs, even with this recent pullback, which is telling us that we need to focus on Ethereum at this point, watching for that big break, because the second that we do get that big break, that will lead to altcoins also going crazy, just like we saw in previous cycles. Now, looking at Wall Street and how successful these ETFs have been, we have over here, Wall Street just yeeted $40 billion into crypto ETFs. Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs just broke records with $40 billion in weekly volume. $17 billion came from Ethereum alone, the rest from Bitcoin, and yes, the suits are officially obsessed. It's like crypto just got its varsity jacket and Wall Street wants to sit at its lunch table. And listen, I think that it's very important to focus on how much value is flowing into these ETFs. It's not a small amount at all. $40 billion. 17 billion of it in Ethereum. This is telling us that there is a massive amount of demand for Ethereum on Wall Street. This will only continue to heat up this year. So if we're getting worried and if we're getting scared or concerned, I want you guys to realize that the demand right now is still extremely high for Ethereum and for crypto itself. Now, we also know over here from Cryptos R Us, Justin, trillion-dollar asset manager Citigroup is considering offering custody and payment services for stablecoins and crypto ETFs. They are also set to speak at Ripple's Swell 2025 conference, alongside BlackRock, BNY, and Franklin Templeton. Big moves incoming. And yeah, what's crazy about this is if we think about Ripple Swell, I've always said that Ripple Swell is a banking conference, but that's not just my words alone. No, we've heard from people like David Schwartz saying that Ripple, which is a blockchain-based company, was one of the first names to actually host a banking conference around crypto. Think about how crazy that is. a banking conference in the form of Ripple Swell, and it's hosted by a blockchain-based company. And the first Ripple Swell goes back to, I want to say, 2016. So think about how early Ripple has been, in this space to actually involve themselves with the institutional players. It's very, very significant to focus on. Now, outside of this, do I think that XRP ETFs are next up on the board? Well, we've been talking about it. We've been addressing it. And we have over here, CNBC, expect a boatload of crypto ETFs to come to the market within the next 2 months, including XRP and HBAR ETFs. Listen closely. Big shout to Smoke Dog for this. And the next 2 months, by the way, add up. That's about roughly October. So that aligns perfectly with a lot of the deadlines for the ETF decisions from the SEC. But check this out.
Speaking of crypto, Nate, similar to the push to market we're seeing in IPOs, you're seeing a lot of what you call a boatload of crypto ETF filings. What does that mean, and how does that differ from what we've seen in the past?
Well, it's interesting because the three major stock exchanges, so NYSE, NASDAQ, and SIBO, they have all filed with the SEC for generic listing standards for crypto ETFs, which basically means that the exchanges wouldn't need to seek specific approval for each spot crypto ETF as long as it meets certain criteria. So this would streamline the approval process. And that's important because right now there are filings out there from multiple issuers for XRP ETFs, Solana ETFs, Cardano, HBAR. We could go on down the list, but there are a boatload of filings out there. And the expectation is that this standardized crypto framework will be implemented, say, in the next 2 months or so. And so if and when that happens, I think you're going to see the floodgates open. We're going to see a wave of approvals, and you're going to see, again, a boatload of new crypto ETFs coming to market.
And yeah, I mean, listen, I completely agree with Nate here because, again, it makes a lot of sense from the broad market point of view, especially aligning perfectly with altcoins really waking up, the Fed rate cut decision as well. It kind of feels like the environment around crypto is kind of set to erupt in September into October. So the next 2 months are definitely prime time for the market to really kind of, continue its upward ascension. So far since April of this year, the market has been very, very bullish. So for about 4 months, we've just been really consolidating to the upside on a lot of altcoins. In terms of Bitcoin, has just been breaking out from those lows, going to 124K. So Bitcoin's been doing very good. And of course, Ethereum nearing new all-time highs. We can't complain about that. Outside of that, though, we have over here, when XRP ETF, we do expect to see a lot of altcoins launching probably in September or October. Again, the timeline here is very similar across the board. Big shout out to Digital Asset Investor for this. This is actually with Stephen McClurg. If you guys don't know, this is the CEO of Canary Funds, which, yes, they do have an XRP ETF filing as well. Check this out.
Now you're the CEO of the investment firm Canary Capital, and so I'm wondering, you have all these applications now with the SEC for spot crypto ETFs tied to altcoins, including XRP and Litecoin. So I know you can't talk about these specific filings, but what do you think happens with those filings in general, with those spot crypto ETFs tied to altcoins?
Well, the SEC has been working very closely with the exchanges, NASDAQ, SIBO, New York Stock Exchange, over the last 6 months to create a generic listing standard. And that got published in the last week. So what the generic listing standard will do is give at least some standards so that you don't have to go through an entire process like we did with Bitcoin, with other cryptocurrencies. That generic listing standard largely looks at futures. And does this token have a futures market in the US or not? And that's one of the qualifications. There's several other qualifications that also apply to other commodities. But if you look at what's proposed and what's public, it's still in the 21-day comment period. But once that's over, we do expect to see a lot of altcoins launching probably in September, October.
So yeah, I mean, again, this timeline is perfect for altcoins. I feel like this is kind of, right around the same exact time that currently the SEC is working on a framework for ETF filings. So it kind of makes sense that this would be in place in the next 2 months at least. And that way we can kind of streamline a lot of these ETF applications. XRP, I would say, is kind of first out of the gate because, again, XRP has just been extremely sought after. The demand around XRP has been skyrocketing. It's kind of, I would say that XRP this cycle so far has become a center stage candidate for adoption around market expansion, exposure, ETFs, even institutional adoption of XRP itself. We've been starting to see a lot of institutional clients coming out and speaking about XRP. So it just makes a lot of sense for XRP to have that, first mover advantage around altcoins getting an ETF. So, and remember what I said, the first altcoin to get an ETF, a spot ETF trading live, will be a massive catalyst for price action. But also remember why the ETFs are so important. Here we have from Brad Garlinghouse, XRP ETFs represent the transition from speculative retail trading to institutional adoption. This is precisely why XRP ETFs are essential. ETFs will be approved and trading soon. Check this out.
There's been an influx of XRP ETF filings, both in and out of the US. How do you view all of this? How do you view these filings?
Well, I think part of the transition from maybe more speculative retail into more institutional adoption and participation is the ETF step. Certainly, the Bitcoin ETF getting approved, the SEC was dragged kicking and screaming a little bit towards that outcome. But getting the Bitcoin ETF, I think, was a monumental event in terms of expanding the ability for others to participate, particularly institutional investors. So to me, I think I said then publicly that if people would ask me, is there going to be an XRP ETF? And I just look, it's inevitable that there will be an XRP ETF. And now I think I actually don't even know. I think there's 4 or 5 different filings here in the US. I know at least one in Europe. And, I think it's great. I think it's, again, not surprising. I certainly hope that we'll see some of those approved soon. And we'll see them trading so others can participate in the ecosystem that otherwise might not be able to because they don't want to custody crypto themselves or other reasons that may exist. But I'm excited for sure, and I think it's a great sign not just for XRP, but I think it's a great sign for crypto broadly. I will say, and I think many people know this.
So yeah, I mean, listen, I do agree with Brad here. Also remember, right, Brad had the original prediction of XRP ETFs trading live in the second half of the year. We are there. Again, timeline aligns perfectly with September, October. We've been hearing about Q3 from Standard Chartered as well. So I think at this point, almost everyone is on board that we will see ETFs for XRP trading live sometime around the September, October region. I also think that the market heats up leading into the fall timeframe. It makes a lot of sense as well, going off of just previous monthly performance for crypto. So we have to watch, wait, and see. But the main thing about XRP that I've always talked about is just the market exposure with these ETFs. There's so many filings for XRP ETFs, which, it's pretty understandable at this point because of just how good XRP has been for a trade in the last 12 months. I don't think that you even need to be an expert in crypto or even around traditional finance to realize that XRP has turned quite a bit of heads this cycle. I mean, it's been up over 400+% in the last year. It's outperformed almost everything in the top 100. And, again, just from an overall market view, you don't even have to be a finance guy. 400% in 12 months. That's a pretty big gain. And it's something that is definitely exciting to see if you hold XRP. And if you're a big player, if you want to get an XRP product out there, like an ETF, you're probably eagerly waiting for this to happen because you're just waiting for that green light. You're just waiting for the market moment to get that ETF live because you know how big of a success it will be, how much money it will make. This is also why I've always said that BlackRock will be on board once we start to see these go live. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because of more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.